Hi, welcome. I'm Chip Franklin, and this is attorney Dan Gilleon. We're here to talk about something that I think that more people need to know about because many times they don't even hear that, and that's women who are attacked, sexually assaulted in many cases by men in positions of authority, and the difficulty in getting justice for these women. How hard is that, Dan?
Well, these cases, it happens all the time, and it just, there's a half of our population um, will be sexually assaulted um, at least one time
Half
in
of
their
our
life.
population, really?
Well, I mean, half
Oh,
as
I see
in
what you mean,
female.
women. Right?
Yeah. So,
Gotcha. Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so basically, two-thirds of half of our population. So all the women in the U.S. certainly, and in other parts of the world, it's much higher number are at some point going to be sexually assaulted. And historically, women have just not reported it unless um, it's there's a number of factors of why certain women will come forward, but the vast majority of them don't come forward. So we're dealing with a kind of a epidemic in a sense, and we have been dealing with this for forever, from the beginning. But even in a civilization like ours, a society like ours, women still are not coming forward and reporting sexual assaults, and there's so many reasons for that. Um, that at least from my experience, because I've never been sexually assaulted, and I've never been in one. So but I just from having represented so many, I kind of understand why they don't, and there's lots of good reasons not to come forward. But it's an epidemic, and it's not going to change. It's not going to change until um, more women come forward, and then as a result of more women coming forward, I think our society will slowly change and start accepting what they're saying as being legitimate. But it's a
It's a courageous act, and it's to come forward because I mean, back in the day, they could question your previous history with boyfriends and others, and even though that's not allowed now, at least as far as I know,
yeah.
it's still it's just it's difficult because people we don't talk about it. I was telling you this before that that I was very close to my four sisters, and I only found out recently that when they were kids, they'd been assaulted by a guy who came right into our yard.
Yeah.
It happens, and it's just this cover up that's not intended to be a cover up, but that's really what it is. Allows this is the most important part. It allows these people to move forward and to do this more and more until somebody actually steps up and stops them.
Yeah. Well, if your son or even daughter get into a fist fight at school or in the playground or whatever, you're going to see it,
Right.
and you're going to force them to talk about it. But sexual assaults, most of them happen behind closed doors, and it's very rare that someone else is going to witness it or there's going to be some sort of marks or bruising. Most of the time, it's going to be just a mental injury in the form of PTSD that really goes untreated, and for the longest time. But unfortunately, that PTSD makes the woman even more susceptible at that point to another sexual assault. And the young woman we're going to be talking to today, she's one of those who has a history of sexual assault from childhood. And as a result of that, that makes her actually more vulnerable to being preyed upon, because the the type of man that's going to actually rape a woman, that's a predator.
Right.
And he's there's
And it's an
unfortunately
act
there's
of
like three
power.
in,
Yeah, it's an act of power, not sex. And that they get off on that power. And if no
what
one
yeah,
stops them, they're enabled.
yeah, I mean, it's I was out golfing yesterday, and someone was wondering why people would be going out and setting fires, the arsonists out there. And I was like, what would be going through this person's mind? And I'm like, 3% of our population, that means 3 out of 100 people are going to be at a minimum sociopaths. And
Yeah.
some of that 3% are going to be psychopaths. And they don't have even the ability to empathize. So the numbers is just the statistically, Sexual assaults happen all the time. It's going to be done by, you know, the more powerful, either physically or just in a position of power. And it just ends up being that women are most of the time the victims of those. And it's most of the time it's men. But, you
Well,
know, it happens the other way around too.
yeah. Well, we're going to be joined in just a second by a courageous woman. We're going to call her Susan. That's not her real name, and we're going to hide her face because of the possible acts of retribution that could come her way if she did this under normal circumstances. She actually had to even leave San Diego because she didn't feel safe here. And we're going to call her Susan. Susan, thank you so much for being here. And I just want to say right up front how impressed I am with your courage and wherewithal to do this, not just for yourself, but for other women.
I wanted to say thank you for allowing me this platform to speak on my story and to put what happened out there so maybe other women could eventually feel the courage to speak up as well.
Where did it start? Tell us the events that led to the attack, and then and then we can talk a little bit about the aftermath and what's happened since.
So I was 18 years old. I was on a dating app. I was very naive to what could happen. I grew up in a military family, so I felt safe around military men. So that was more my type because I felt safe. I matched with a guy, and we just were hanging out as friends. And I went to go hang out with one of my other friends on base. And he decided to come over because he was a friend of my other friend. I didn't know that at the time. They knew each other through work. And so we ended up watching movies, playing games, just having a normal night as a group of friends. I was getting to know this guy, whatever happened. And by the time we were done, it was really late. It was around 1 a.m. I'd say 1 a.m. or so. And I didn't feel comfortable getting in an Uber because I don't know, 1 o'clock in the morning with an Uber doesn't sound the most comfortable. So I asked my friend if I could stay over at his place overnight, and I did. And he allowed that, and which is not typically allowed on bases, which was partially not the greatest hindsight on my thought, but I was just worried about my safety going in Uber, but little did I know it happened either way.
The man who attacked you, did others know about the attack, or it was just him and you?
So by the time where I was sleeping, it was a 2-bedroom. There was multiple rooms in one of these barracks rooms. So usually there's about 4 to 6 people per barracks room on this specific base on North Island Naval Air Base. And so I was in one of the rooms with the guy that I matched with because we were both staying the night. And it was an empty room. I didn't know this at the time, but by the time I woke up, my friend that I went on base originally left for work. And so nobody else was there. So it was just me and him, and he probably knew this knowledge beforehand. I'm not sure.
Tell us about the days and weeks that followed the attack. What did you do? What did you, after the attack, and you had experience, you had been sexually assaulted in your life before, and
Yes.
and it was obviously a very difficult time. And I know that women that are watching this right now, or anyone watching this right now, can put themselves in your position and imagine the fear and just I would imagine the confusion. What happened immediately after?
So as you said, as a child, I was sexually assaulted.
So this one was very different for me. The ones when I was younger, there was no bodily harm done or like physical, like, broken bones or bruising or anything that left any marks. With this case, he did shove my head in a pillow to the point my nose bled and had some cartilage tearing. And so at that point, I was scared, and I went into his bathroom, the bathroom that was, and I found something that he brought his medicine over the night before. So I took a picture of his medicine, which no one ever should have to. And I called one of my friends. I said, "Hey, look, this just happened. I need you to pick me up." I walked outside of the bathroom and I immediately just acted like nothing was wrong. I acted like everything was perfectly fine. Like, I wasn't hurt. I wasn't, I was just like, oh, it was a little accident. I was trying to blow it off just to protect myself.
You were in survival mode.
Yeah.
One of the scariest things is when you have to be in the same room as your assaulter, but you just have to act like nothing happened. You just have to. I was sitting across from him and I was just waiting for my friend to text me she was here. And I was just like, oh gosh, what's going to happen? So I was just sitting there and I was just like, oh, like I was just talking to him like anything normal. And so after my friend picked me up, I wanted to go home. I didn't want to report this, but my friend said, Cami, look, you still have bleeding. You still have you have some damage. I want you to go get checked out. So she told me she would take me to the ER. She took me to the ER. She called my mom. This was probably one of the most hard things about my attack. My mother spoke out, and when she came into the room, she told me with my behavior, it was a when, not an if. That was one of the most heartbreaking things to hear as a daughter, because I felt like she didn't really care that it happened to me, but rather expected it to happen, but she didn't want to protect me in that situation. So after I just told her to leave. After that, the NCIS or the Navy police came to do an initial report. I spoke to them. I did what they asked me to do. I repeated the story. They recorded it and whatever. And so they asked me to do a rape kit. I said, okay, I'll do it. Like, I wanted at this point to get justice because I was tired of the same cycle. So I did the rape kit. They had to go through the whole procedure of, giving me new clothes and, because they had to take my clothes that were assaulted in, and I had to tell them if I left any clothes there or anything like that. And so that went through the whole process. I told them that there was an article of clothing still left at the person's room, and that there should have been, some of my blood on the pillowcase or whatever. So the NCIS took that information. They said they would do a crime scene within 24 hours. About a week after that, they called me in and said, hey, we need to do your second thing to see if the story changed or if it was still the same and consistent. So I went in, I did the interview. Everything stayed the same that I could remember. I mean, when you go through something like this, a lot of the times you don't remember small details because your brain goes into panic mode and tries to block out these memories.
So there's
It's
small.
kind of like being in a car accident.
Yeah.
You're a little bit of shock.
You forget these small details. Like when I was first in the hospital, I could say exactly what he was wearing, what color it was, what color the bed sheets were, everything. About a week later, I couldn't, which was apparently a part of the trauma, according to a lot of the therapists I saw afterwards.
So your friend helped you out a lot by getting you to go in and make this claim.
Yes, it was definitely something that I was really scared to do, because at that point, I just remember I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to be in my room alone. I didn't want to feel like I didn't want to be out in public eye, because I felt gross. I felt used. I felt, really these awful feelings that a woman shouldn't have to feel. I felt like, I was just, I was less than someone, which is, I wasn't even a full human, because clearly when I said no, they didn't believe it.
So when you spoke to Dan, and Dan, why don't you tell me a little bit about the first meeting? Obviously you've seen cases like this. No, they're all different, but in some cases, obviously they're the same. And what was your reaction? And early on, also, Susan, I want to hear like how difficult it was for you to find somebody like Dan that could see what you were, in, and how a way out. Dan, you remember?
Yeah, when I take phone calls like this, I'm given a little bit of the facts a lot of times through an intake procedure at my office. And so I had a little bit of information, and, I went into this one knowing already that the case, a lawsuit, was going to be very, very difficult from the standpoint of recovering any money.
Why is
Because,
that?
well, Well, because generally speaking, people that do this, and like this is I think a 22-year-old Navy guy, sailor. He is that right, Susan? Was he in the
Yeah.
Navy? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's not going to have any money, right? There's not going to be any insurance policy, or there's not going to be an employer that's on the hook. So, when a civil litigator like me, when we take cases for young women like Susan, they're not going to be paying an hourly. I don't take cases on an hourly anyway. Um, but I know going in that it's going to be a situation where I'm probably going to be telling her that the case itself, a civil case, isn't going to have an outcome of any sort of financial, significance. So I knew that going in, because here there was some. This was referred by an attorney, and so, but the attorney who referred it doesn't do this practice this area. So he was thinking, well, maybe there would be some liability on the Navy, that sort of thing. And but I knew going in it there wasn't. So, but I spoke to Susan, and so the first thing that I hear from her that's very, very common in scenarios like this is that the first thing she did was go to the police. And I could have predicted, and I think I probably did, here, that the police have come back to her and told her that they weren't going to pursue the case. Now, that's very, very common. Very, very few cases of sexual assault ever get even reported to the police, and then much less ever really, really investigated. And even those that get investigated, they don't get charged by the prosecutor, and for lots of reasons that can't go into it right now. But I knew that, I've had a case, one in particular I was thinking about when I made this phone call was another young woman who was sexually assaulted and went through the very invasive procedure of the SART exam, the sexual assault exam. It's not something that any young woman wants to go through. It's very invasive. It takes a long time. And just to be able to do that, make the decision, well, first of all, to call the police, and then second of all, to go through that sort of examination, that right there is showing me that something happened here. A woman doesn't want to go through this, and she did it anyway, especially a young woman. But sure enough, the Navy came back and said, we're not going to file charges. Now, Susan, like most young women, don't understand why, because they know what happened. They think that there's evidence there, and then they hear, in this case, I think it was the investigating officer told her that there wasn't there wasn't substantiating evidence, some sort of phrase like that. They'll probably use that sort of thing. Well, a young woman doesn't understand that these investigators are looking at criminal cases where they know that the case is only going to be filed by the DA if there's evidence sufficient to beat a burden of proof of beyond a reasonable doubt. So in criminal cases, a prosecutor cannot file charges unless that prosecutor believes that he or she actually can convince 12 out of 12 jurors beyond a reasonable doubt that this person did it. And so this is a scenario where behind closed doors, it was a dating scenario, and it's going to be his word versus hers. And even worse than that, he doesn't even have to testify. It can just be being grilled by a defense lawyer on the stand. And if there's any doubt in any one of the jurors, the guy's not going to get convicted. So yeah, it always happens. I mean, in my experience, always happens that the DAs or even the police come back and say, we're not going to file. Well, she can't understand that. And she's interpreted what they're saying as meaning that he's going to get away with it, and even questioning her. So she suddenly goes from being a victim to almost the suspect. And that's what I heard in Susan's rehashing of this. But what was most compelling, I think, in Susan's case, was that she was so articulate. First of all, she had parental support. And even though, yes, I heard about what the mother had said, as a father, I understood that, this was traumatic for the mom too. And she doesn't know how to deal with this. And she just blurts out, her concern is she doesn't want this to happen to Susan again. So what can we do to make Susan safer? Well, unfortunately, she kind of said something that kind of tended to blame Susan, when probably in reality, she was just saying, there's nothing we can do to control the predators out there. So what can I say to her to change her behavior to make this less likely? It wasn't very compassionate, but it was best she did at that moment. But, here, I think the final factor for me was just that this had happened again. And there was something that Susan said to me during that, which is, I didn't do anything the first 2 times. I want to do something now. And that's when we had a discussion, and I was actually in the grocery store when I was having this discussion with her, was like, okay, so do you want justice? Yes, that's what I want. Well, what is justice? I don't know. Okay, well, justice is not going to be money here. Okay. Yes, that's fine. I don't care about the money. Well, what is justice then? Would it be just fighting back? Would it simply be fighting back for the first time in your life? And she's like, yeah, I just want to fight back. And I want other women to know, and I want to expose him for who he is. I'm like, well, okay, well, I can achieve that.
That's the most impressive. I mean, I've known you a long time, Dan. I've seen you do this before. And I'm really impressed that both of you are moving forward on a case that has a very small chance of any kind of financial compensation, but you're doing it based on, the desire for justice. And we live in a cynical world. We don't see this a lot. And I know it's hard. It's hard for both of you. I mean, and Susan, obviously, when you first, were trying to find an attorney for this, it had to be really frustrating, and not what you expected, right?
Yes, it was very difficult. It was actually, I was an assigned to attorney through the Navy. It took them 2 months to give me a response, to hear anything from them. And they just said they think it's misinformed consent. And I asked them, did you ever go and retrieve the blood from the bed or do anything to go in and look and get my clothing? And they said they never actually did that. So that was one of the hardest things. So I couldn't they never went in there and did what they said they were going to do. And so going forward, trying to find an attorney, they would be like, was there a crime scene done? What kind of evidence you have? And I said, I have friends I called in the bathroom. I have pictures of his medication bottle. I have a SART kit that came back with, positive for his DNA for him, well, for sperm in me. And, I told them what happened, and, there was damage to my body, and I have all this proof. I have these records of it. Here's what they are. And all of them were like, oh, do you have a picture of him? I said, in the moment I was scared, so I blocked him on everything, trying to protect myself. And so I didn't have a picture of him in the moment. So they're like, oh, we can't identify who he is. And then after about, I'd say 10 or so attorneys, I talked to a female one. She told me straight up that most attorneys will not pursue this case because against the Navy, it will take years and a lot of resources and a lot of money, and it won't get anywhere because, they don't typically settle for anything. So with that being said, it was quite defeating because I feel like all these other attorneys were kind of giving me other reasons, but, it was defeating to hear that it wouldn't go anywhere where I could at least, like Dan said, call him out by name or, get any type of justice, because being quiet is one of the most painful things because, I relive these things every night. I have nightmares every night. I get psychological treatment and it's not effective because it's a repetitive thing. And it's one of the most heartbreaking things to not be able to find anyone that's willing to take the case. It felt like there was no chance that it was going to be, I thought it was just going to be another number file. It was just going to be another allegation. It was going to be just another complaint. It wasn't going to be something where I got to actually speak out and say, this is what he did to me, and this is not fair. And so when it was funny, I would always look on Google. I'd search up, sexual assault attorneys, and I'd always end up in one where, either they were defense and they don't really take on prosecution cases, or that they just didn't have the resources or the time, or they didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And then one day I just started randomly calling a bunch of them off of Google and just being like, hey, this is my case. This is what happened. Is there anyone that would take my case? One of Dan's coworkers that he mentioned actually did say, hey, I do know somebody. I'll give you I'll give him your contact information. He'll be in contact. And that was something that felt so relieving. I think one of the hardest parts about this, though, was actually when you finally get the chance to talk to an attorney, a lawyer, an advocate even, about the situation, it feels intimidating because you're like, wow, now I actually have a chance to speak out. But then the minute you start talking to someone about it, it feels intimidating, like in the sense of, is this going to be someone that's going to believe me? Is this going to be somebody that understands the situation? Is this somebody that is willing to take a chance on my case? And it's very provoking with anxiety to go in and talk to somebody and, see what they can do for your case, because the worst thing you can hear is no. And in this case, hearing no sometimes really does suck because you feel even more defeated. It's like you're getting punched 100 times to get one hooray,
You were looking for an ally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of advocates, even with advocates, I couldn't, they were like, there's not much you can do. They would tell me, the best thing is you get treatment and you move on with your life. And there's a part of me that doesn't want to do that anymore, because being another number, being another statistic, I don't want to be that. I think one of the biggest things for me is going into this, it was hard to find anybody that told me, you know what, you can do this. And so then finding an attorney that says, hey, I'm willing to take on this, and I'm willing to help you in a way, even if it's just for an apology, or even if it's just to get his name out there, or just to get awareness, that is something I'd rather do, because I feel like I'd rather get hurt than other women get hurt. And in this case, I did. And now I'm ready to step out and say, this is it. I'm done.
Dan, Susan's courage is rare in many of these cases, right? Because it's just so difficult.
Well, yeah. I mean, like you just go back to the numbers. Women are going to be sexually assaulted today, and they'll never tell anybody. But so for a woman to actually call the police and go through that rape kit is just extraordinary, right there. But then to say, to keep calling lawyers and keep getting rejected, but pursuing it anyway, that's extraordinary. But it's it's what's really needed. At least, there's so much that's needed to curb this problem in society.
Epidemic.
Women need, their part is very, very, very difficult, which is coming forward. But that's the most important part, just coming forward and being willing to do something. Here, Susan knows that, filing a lawsuit is not going to achieve what a civil lawsuit is really designed to do, which is to get money. But it's the only mechanism really that's here. I mean, we could do a restraining order, but why do a restraining order? The guy's not going to, there's no real reason to restrain him. It's not going to really achieve anything. You can't issue subpoenas on restraining orders. So the lawsuit is a way to do it. And for her to be able to have the courage to actually file the lawsuit and then give a deposition That's extraordinary, but it is what's required, at least to try to fight back on this.
Well,
You know, she, um, when she told me that she had talked to so many lawyers and, that they were just basically kind of shutting her down, is very unfortunate because, these lawyers out there that really don't know what they're doing. Um, I just wish they would say, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know anything about this area. Um, and find her a lawyer that actually does. But because so many of the women, even that go through all this, they could get turned down by one lawyer, and that's the end of it. For some reason, Susan kept going, and I guess I'm the 11th lawyer. Sounds like when I was speaking to her that I was the first one that actually, it sounds like, ever explained the process to her and explained why these the police or the prosecutor said they weren't going to file charges. Um, and and then she said she wanted to do it, and was going to protect her name and expose him, and we'll do what we can. But I just have a question for you, Susan, which is, um, just going through what you've gone through, and even right now, um, are you happy? At least, do you feel some level of justice at some point? Just going through having talked to me and then doing this interview, is it worth it? Knowing even if this is all there is it worth it, or do you wish you had just bit your tongue and gone silent again? I
When
mean,
I was
when you fight back, in other words, fighting back, or is it just the process of fighting back, the cathartic, the catharsism that happens, the releasing of all this pent up anger and fear? Does it have to be a complete victory, or is it just the process of fighting back? Sometimes it's helpful.
For me, when I bit my tongue and I stayed quiet, I never really felt anger or fear. I felt guilt. I felt like I put myself in that situation. I felt like, if I was smarter, this wouldn't have happened. If I would have fought back and I didn't stay quiet while it was happening, it would have gone further. You know, I I felt a lot of guilt on myself. And with this situation, I knew I did my best and I was screaming no and I was fighting back and I was trying to, and eventually I did give up, but I did what I could. And at this point I did feel anger, and there's a certain point where I think you can only take so much guilt on yourself before you realize it's not you that did this to myself. I didn't choose to be sexually assaulted. I was taken advantage of in the situation. Um, it's definitely scary speaking out. I was scared of, at first I was worried about, repercussions before these safety measures were put in place. I was scared of lawsuits, but at the same time, if nobody speaks out, nobody's going to start speaking out even more. And, you know, you have, sometimes you have to be the first, and that's the scary thing. Um, and you hear these stories about women speaking out but going nowhere. There's this part of me that when I fight back, I feel like maybe this has even a 0.1% chance of getting somewhere. Maybe this will, reach the right people. This will make other women, not be so afraid. It's, for me, I'd rather take the fear now and have other people be able to feel safe reaching out and getting the justice they need than, just sitting quiet and not doing anything.
Yeah, Chip, this sailor, um, this wasn't his first time, just because of how violent this was. And there's a reason why he did it this time, is because he's gotten away with it in the past. And right now, he may know that there was a criminal investigation against him, but who knows? I mean, it doesn't sound like they did anything, so he may not even know. But even if he does, um, at some point, this is going to be another example of him getting away with it. And so what is that going to do? it means the next opportunity he has to do it, he's going to say, I can get away with it, and it's going to happen again.
I think the momentum here may be hard to see at first, but I mean, your courage and your conviction and your ability to, for when people listen to you, Susan, I'm just telling you, we've never met until now. I'm inspired. I'm inspired to go that extra length for justice for whatever the event is in my life and other people's lives. I have children that I would love to hear this interview and hear you talk after what you've been through to stand up and be this courageous. I'm glad you guys found each other because, as I said before, I've seen Dan work with people before in cases that didn't have much chance of bringing money back. But the point is about making a point sometimes, and standing up for yourself and for others you may never meet. If we can just stop this guy from doing this again, the women that won't have to hunt you down to thank you will nonetheless have been the beneficiary of your courage and honesty and frankness and a willingness to fight back. I think that, I think we don't, like as Dan said, we don't hear these stories enough, and that's what's going to change things. Us people hearing these stories and what happened to you, and maybe some people that see it in their sons or their husbands or their boyfriends, to maybe stop them from the next time. And I don't mean to be Pollyannish about it, but I really believe that. I really do. So moving forward here, what's next, Dan?
Well, Susan needs to decide whether or not she wants to, file a lawsuit, and the lawsuit would be filed against him, just the sailor himself, the defendant, the predator. But once that lawsuit's filed, I, as an attorney, have subpoena power, and I can set him down for deposition, and he can take the fifth at the deposition, but and I can't bring that into evidence at trial. They took the fifth, but what it will do is it will keep him from showing up at trial and suddenly telling his story, right? And so I don't have the burden of proof that a prosecutor does. I just have to prove that it's probably happened, more likely true than not true. So in other words, 51% or greater. And you've got a young woman coming in and saying, this is what happened. And you got a defendant that's sitting there, doesn't say a word. Well, guess who wins? Yeah. So the he said, she said scenario that the prosecutors oftentimes deal with, it's not the same in civil cases, because if a guy's going to talk, then I'm going to catch him in a lie. So it's not going to be he said, she said. It's going to be he lied, she said. So that's what, that's the difference between criminal cases and civil cases. He either speaks and I'm going to catch him in a lie, or he stays silent and there's no evidence to counter what she said. So we win. Now, what happens with we win? We win a judgment for money, but then we record that.
Right.
And if he ever wants to buy a house, wants ever get a loan, good luck. There's a chance that this guy comes from money, or his parents will come up with a lot of money and settle the case. But I'm not going into it with that mindset. I'm going into it saying, hey, if your level of justice is fighting back and exposing this person, we can achieve that justice, because we can certainly fight back and we can make it very painful for him. And if that's going to, if you're okay with that, then I'm okay with that, because I do these sort of cases because I have the luxury now, after practicing for as long as I have the luxury now of taking cases that actually can be meaningful and have impact, and not worry about, meeting my overhead. But there's a lot of lawyers out there that don't have that luxury. And again, I wish, if, talking to them is like, if someone like Susan calls you, don't talk to them about all the problems with a lawsuit. Just find someone that doesn't see those problems like me, and I can at least explain it better to her.
Yeah. At the very least, listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Susan, thank you so much for this time, this valuable story for others and for yourself. And I know that people watching this are going to keep an eye out and probably reach out to Dan and to see where the case moves forward. Again, thank you. Please stay well, and I hope, I really do hope you continue to grow and in the strength that I'm telling you, I can feel it right through this monitor. You know, the kind of person you are, and wish you the very, very best.
Thank you guys so much for your time, and thank you for allowing me this platform to speak what happened out.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Dan. Wow, that's moving stuff. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, like I said, I've seen you do this before, and I think that there's, you know, I know you well enough to know that there's a part of you that, you know, that just gets pissed off when you see
Yeah.
this, right? I mean, it's simply that.
Yeah.
I've seen it before, and you know, on your bad golf shots, and also when no, but I mean, the
Yeah.
idea though that you know, something like this is just going to be brushed aside, it bristles you.
Yeah. You know, there's a lot of unfairness in the world, but as an attorney with my license, I at least I have the ability to fight back, and I can do something meaningful. I have 3 daughters, and these are the cases. These are the cases I found to be the most rewarding from the standpoint of doing something with my license that actually means something. All my friends that are out there just chasing a dollar, they're never happy. They're never going to be happy. And so this is what I do. And yeah, I've been bullied myself, and I like fighting back. I like hurting people that are,
No,
that
people
like,
deserve it. Yeah.
there's a part of me that just likes that. Kind of the hunter killer in me that likes to take on a challenge and then fight for somebody that really, without me, just doesn't have the means to fight.
Good stuff, my friend. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Well, thank you.
That's attorney Dan Gilleon. I'm Chip Franklin. We'll see you next time.